Everyone's had a good morning. Day 3, Wednesday. A little bit different today. I want to go over a couple things we're doing administratively before we have our morning talk. Please, I know you guys got a band thing last night, but there was a lot of tinfoil and other trash left in this auditorium. So if you could please, when you leave your area, just look around, take out anything. It should be just as clean when you leave as when you arrived. We obviously want to stay at EMU going forward, so if we do our part here, we want them to invite us back every year, so please do your part picking up trash, not only here, but anywhere, your room, dorm, walking around campus. Please do our part so we can continue to stay here. So, all right, today, going over the schedule, we know we're in here until this is done, so anytime around 11:30 or so. Then we have lunch at 12. Team challenge is at 1:30, all right? Supposed to have thunder showers this afternoon, so it's hit or miss. Right now it's still on. If it's just raining, we will still do it, but if it's thunder, lightning, thing like that, we won't. So just check your band app. That's what will let you know. If it gets canceled due to inclement weather, we just won't do anything. You'll get an hour back, okay? So but right now it's still a go. It just depends on what starts happening around 1:15, 1:30, okay? Then after that, you have lunch. I'm sorry, that's after lunch. Team challenge is 1:30 to 3, an hour and a half. Then we go back to our dorms, and we clean up basically the dorms from 3 to 4. Or whenever you get back there, we want to kind of do a midweek, clean up the trash, bathrooms, everything, just so moving out on Friday goes a little more efficiently, okay? And then 4:30, we're back in here for mini sessions again, and then dinner at 6, okay? Dinner is a little different tonight. It's kind of a picnic / thing where we don't, the coaches and counselors are helping serve the students, and you can get food, eat in the dining hall, or you can go sit outside on campus. You just have to clean up, but it's paper utensils, things like that. It's stuff, the food is more catered to what it would be like if you're at a picnic, that type of thing. So it's a little different. We ask that coaches and counselors come down a little before, help cut pie, help set out food, things like that. We are giving the dining hall staff a little bit of a break today. So a little bit of a different dinner tonight. And then we're back in here at 8 o'clock for the evening session, okay? Staff, we leave anything out? Again, there's no running this afternoon. If we have the team challenge, that's where your running is, okay? It is the basically scavenger hunt. You'd be running across campus. You might get 2 to 3 miles of running. So if you come at 1:30, don't wear flip-flops. Don't come bare feet. Obviously, you got to bring running shoes because you'll be running from one place. There's 9 different venues on campus that you're sprinting back and forth on. So you got to come ready to move if we're having the afternoon thing, okay? And then a note, I'll mention again this afternoon, but this evening, you're going to learn yoga, and we're going to meet in the gym. So dress for a yoga type workout when you come to the evening session, okay? And that will be in on the basketball court in the gym at 8 o'clock tonight. All right, Kelly, anything else? Nope. Oh, AOC's water bottle here, whoever AOC is. All right. All right, this morning we'll go on to stay within the framework. What we're trying to do is provide you with some information on how to make yourself better as athletes and also better as people. We have a couple of sports psychologists, a sports psychologist and a psychologist with us today. I'm going to let Coach Walton, I wouldn't do justice to the introduction here, so I'll let him handle that.
Good morning, everybody. Great job so far this week, both with your running and with paying attention and learning something in these sessions. This morning I've got the honor of introducing 2 colleagues I've worked with in the past. When I was the director of track and field and cross country at James Madison University, Dr. Bob Harmison was the sports psychologist that works with all the teams at JMU, and he worked with the track and cross country teams as well. So he also does a great job. He has a speaker series where he brings in sports psychologists to campus for the coaches and or athletes to interact with as well. So that's my interaction with Dr. Harmison. Dr. Jamie Kurtz, after I retired, I continued teaching in the kinesiology department, and I taught a wellness class. I was the lead instructor where I did all the lectures, and I had a section there where I trained first-time marathoners. And it was a semester-long class where we trained them to run their first marathon, and then we actually took them to run a marathon at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Dr. Kurtz approached me about doing a research project with the class, which I thought was pretty cool. And she did all the research. I supplied the subjects. She also went along and ran the marathon with us, and she has quite a bit of experience running marathons in Chicago, Rehoboth Beach. I think you said, did you run one in Italy or? Italy, Florence, Italy. So she's had a good bit of experience running a marathon. So if you'll please supply your attention, I think we've got some interesting items to be brought forth to you this morning.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Merry Christmas to some of you. I hope you're all having a good week. I'm really happy to be here. And I want to give you some tips that you can use to change your mindset when you run, when you face challenges, when you feel stress, that you can use anytime. Hopefully, we're going to focus on when you're running, but you can use these anytime you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. Okay, so you can just keep that in mind. These are tips that have a lot of research behind them. I'm not going to get into the research, but these aren't just things I'm making up. These are things that have been studied and written about pretty extensively. And as you'll see, they often involve just shifting your mindset, changing your story, changing your assumptions a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to challenge you to figure out how you can make these work best for you, your personality, your schedule, your running life, and so on. Okay, so before we get into all of that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself just for a minute. I'm a professor of psychology at James Madison University right down the road, and there I focus on the study of happiness and well-being. Okay, so I teach classes on that and on other things in psychology as well. I'm also a runner and triathlete. I've done 13 marathons. I've run Boston 3 times, including in the historically bad weather of 2018, if you know, you know, and all over the world as well. I didn't really come to running until maybe college or even a little bit later. So to me, when I was playing sports in middle school and high school, running was kind of punishment. Take a lap, you know. And it was only later on that I realized how much joy you could find in running, how much you could come to learn about your natural environment, be present in the moment, be in your body, think about things beyond the stressors of everyday life. And I've come to have a 20-plus year love of running. And one of my goals for you is that you can develop and maintain that love of running throughout your life. Okay. So yeah, this is what I'm hoping you can get out of this session. Maybe some lofty goals, but I want you to find this balance where you're challenging yourself, pushing yourself, but also having fun, right? How do you find that balance? And you might not experience both challenge and fun every single day at the exact same moment, but when you step back and think about your running and what you're doing, with the sport in general, you're like, yeah, it's hard, but I love it. Have you ever heard this term type 2 fun? Type 2 fun? This is a good term to know. So type 1 fun is like eating chocolate, laying around watching your favorite show on Netflix, posting pictures on Instagram and getting likes. I don't know, things that just are pleasurable and easy and feel good in the moment. Type 2 fun is a term my brother just told me about, and I've researched it a little bit since, where it's hard in the moment, right? It's not easy, but when you kind of step back and look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that's really great. I feel alive, I feel purposeful, I feel inspired. Okay, so running can be both, I think, type 1 and type 2 fun, but it's mostly, a lot of the time, type 2, and that's great. Anyway, you will have setbacks as you pursue this sport. Maybe you've already grappled with some setbacks, an injury, a disappointing race, a disappointing performance, something like that. How do you get over that effectively? How do you learn from it? But how do you stay motivated? How do you maintain that love of running? Okay, so I'm going to give you some tips today to try to get there. And then how do you maintain a positive, if you want, lifelong relationship with running? This is something that you can do your whole life if you take care of your body and stay motivated, right? So it's a wonderful way to see the world. You go on vacation, you go out for a run, you see it. It's a wonderful way to take care of your mental health during the pandemic. You had the privilege of going outside and going for a run. And for many of us, I think that was really essential to our mental health. So how do you keep that as a thing you have in your life and something that you enjoy? Okay. And how do you fit it in when life gets stressful and busy? You can still find time for those really rejuvenating runs. Okay, so I have 4 tips for you. But before we get into those, when you think about running, like what's an emotion that you have? Just when you think about running, what comes to mind? You can shout it out. Pain, okay. Joy, thank you. Fun. Disgust? No. Maybe. You run the full range of emotions, right? From joy to pain and everything in between. So, yeah, you might also have moments of stress, of anxiety. I'm sure you said things that I couldn't quite pick up. So, how do we scale it more toward the positive? And a lot of that has to do with the stories you tell yourself. Okay, you have a lot that goes on physically when you're running, of course, but you also have a lot going on up here. So the first trick I want to tell you about is something you can do when you feel anxious before a race. Okay, so let me unpack this graph for a minute. Anxiety and excitement actually have a lot in common emotionally. So just gonna get a little abstract here, but when you feel anxious, things are happening in your body, right? Your palms maybe are sweating, your heart's racing, you feel on edge, you feel jittery. But when you feel excited, you kind of have all those same things going on too, right? And when you get to your race, your event, the starting line, you want to feel excited, you want to feel pumped up, right? You listen to music to get yourself there, or you do cheers, or team building things to kind of pump yourselves up as a team. You don't want to be calm. You don't want to be like nice and mellow and about to fall asleep. You want to be in that heightened state, right? But it's very easy to call that anxiety. I want to challenge you to instead call it excitement. Okay, you feel all those things in your body. Hey, I'm pumped. I'm ready to go. It's a really simple way to just flip anxiety into excitement. Okay, so it's easier to go from anxiety over here to excitement. You're staying in that heightened state in your body rather than just like calming yourself down. That's not always what is easy or even the best thing to do. Okay, so I have a couple scenarios here. Okay, so imagine the situation. We're gonna put this trick to use. You're sitting in school, you're watching the clock, knowing that you have a really important meet after school. Okay, so as the school day is winding down, you're seeing the clock inch further and further to the end of the school day. You find yourself getting more and more nervous. You feel your heart racing, your palms are sweating, and just thinking about this race, you're just feeling overwhelmed. Okay, and the most unfortunate thing about this is as you're feeling more and more nervous, you catch yourself thinking some pretty debilitating negative sorts of things like, I guess I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. That's a sign that I'm not going to succeed. So this is maybe something you've all experienced, and it's not just with sport, public speaking, a difficult conversation, asking somebody out on a date, like all these nerve-wracking things, you can start to feel really overwhelmed. Okay, so given what we just talked about with changing anxiety into something else, why don't you get with a partner and just talk for a minute about how can you get out of this mindset? So take a few minutes. All right. So I would love to hear what you all, or what some of you had to say about this. You have to speak up really loudly so the whole room can hear you, okay? So how do you get out of this mindset? Yes. Think positive. Yeah. Great. Yes. Love it. Yeah. Remind yourself, I'm ready. Tell yourself all the things you've done to prepare for this. Fantastic. Yeah. Ooh. It takes ridiculous confidence to do ridiculous things, so you have to have confidence. Yes. Breathing exercises. That would be a good way to maybe calm that anxiety. Another thing I would want to have you consider is tell yourself that all these things happening in your body are actually signs of excitement. Oh my gosh, I'm ready. Look how pumped up I am, right? And tell yourself, just change your story, right? I am excited. I'm ready to go. I can't wait. My heart's racing. My palms are sweating. I am ready to go. Okay, that's the feeling you sort of want to have on the starting line, but you don't want it to come with all these emotions and all these negative things that you're telling yourself that I can't do this. No, flip your story, flip your script. Okay, so that's something you can do when you feel those emotions taking hold, those physiological things in your body. I guess I'm pumped up. Okay, so that's my first tip. My second tip is something you may or may not have heard of. This is something called self-compassion. Self-compassion is a really handy skill to have when you disappoint yourself a little bit. Okay, so let's say that you had a race and it didn't go all that well. Ask yourself, what do I tell myself in those moments? Good, I'm still capable. That's very kind, it's very supportive. Sometimes though, and you might not want to admit it, but sometimes we come down really hard on ourselves. Ugh, you suck. Why didn't you work harder? What is wrong with you? Right? We have these habits of speaking to ourselves in ways that are not very kind. And a really nice, quick way to check in with yourself is, would I say this to my friend or would I say this to my teammate if they had a bad race, right? And if the answer is yes, if it's something kind, great. Yeah, good. Yeah, so you're reassuring your teammates and yourself. But if you're saying something harsh to yourself, just check in and say, would I say this to my teammate? And if the answer is no, maybe you shouldn't be saying it to yourself either. Okay, so self-compassion is basically being a friend to yourself, being supportive. It is not, I want to stress, it is not going easy on yourself. It's not giving yourself a total out, but it's just considering the fact that everybody has bad days. Everybody has setbacks. Okay, so people who are kind to themselves and compassionate in the way they talk to themselves, they are happier people. They tend to be less stressed, and they're more resilient. Okay, do y'all know what I mean by resilient? Perfect. Yeah, the ability to bounce back from difficulty, from hardship. You're all going to have hardships. You're all going to have disappointments. As hard as you work, there's always going to be that day that doesn't go so well. It happens to professional runners. It happens to people you admire, your heroes. You read any of their stories, their biographies, or just interviews they give, and they always have a disappointment here and there, or an injury or a setback. And you have to be able to kind of support yourself through that. And acknowledging that everybody has these moments, everybody has setbacks, is really, really important. Okay. And one nice thing about being kind to yourself is that you're more you feel safer at pushing yourself, at challenging yourself. Okay, imagine that when you push yourself and you fall short, you beat yourself up and you say harsh things to yourself. Are you gonna wanna push yourself again? No, you're less likely because you know how upset you get when it doesn't go that well. So you push yourself, and maybe, a little bit of a disappointment. Being nice to yourself is going to make it easier to push yourself in the future. Does that make sense? Thank you. Good. Good. Let's try it out. All right. So you have an important race. You practiced, you trained, you did all the work, but sadly it doesn't go well. So afterwards you sit down, you're trying to make sense of it. What happened? Okay. So what kinds of things do you say to yourself as you think through this? Maybe you've already had this happen. Talk about it with a friend for a minute or somebody sitting next to you. Okay. First of all, raise your hand if you've ever had a disappointing practice race event. Okay, so look around the room. Everybody has had these experiences, right? So you're definitely not alone, and you can just file that away too as something you know. You know, even the most dedicated runners, here you are at this camp, you've all had those moments. So, okay, what do you do? How do you get through it? One bad race does not define who you are. Perfect. I love it. Yes. Mm-hmm. So you take a kind of more logical approach. Like, let's analyze this. What went not so great? And you can learn from it. Perfect. Love it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you tell yourself, I can't go back in time. I can't redo it. Mm-hmm. But you can learn from it. Right? Sounds like you all have some really good tools already. Okay, so okay, so your coach yells at you and you tell yourself, okay, I can do better. Well, it sounds like you are able to have that voice in your head of support, which sounds really important. Anybody else? But anything else you talked about? Yeah. Oh, okay. You were nominated, but it's okay. Oh, yeah. Ooh, yes, I love that. Yeah, you're going to have bad days, but it makes the good days even better. So that's a really nice thing to remember, that kind of big picture. Yep, you're being nominated. Okay. Okay, Kit Kat. Can we call this self-care? Yes. So, lovely. So you're being kind to yourself, right? Have a Kit Kat, watch something on TV that's going to take the edge off. And then maybe the next day, you can kind of think about the race from a calmer place, a kinder place. Okay, so thank you for your participation. It's really fun. So just kind of checking in with yourself. And if you aren't sure, you're not sure how you talk to yourself in the face of disappointment because you just haven't really paid attention before, next time I invite you to check in. What's that? What am I telling myself? Would I say this to my teammate? Would I say this to my friend who's going through a tough time? And if the answer is no, try to get that voice in your head. What would I say to my friend? Let me practice saying that to myself. Again, it doesn't mean you're not going to push yourself in the future. It doesn't mean you're not going to challenge yourself, but it's going to take the edge off of that and let you think about it in a way that isn't so upsetting, so you can hopefully learn from it and move forward. Okay, self-compassion for all things in life is a really wonderful resource. Okay, the third thing, oh yeah. Okay, so what if you're hard on yourself, but it's ultimately a positive thing? Do you have an example? It motivates you? Okay, so everybody's different, of course, right? So I would just, challenge you to, if you like that voice in your head, also try to work in some of the more supportive stuff too. Try to balance it out, okay? Because I want you to not just run well, but also feel good about yourself. And you can have both. Any other questions at this point? We will have time at the end as well. A string of bad races. What do you tell yourself? Yeah, so I think it's maybe time to then talk to your coach about, not just your mental story you're telling yourself, but also the physical. What can I do differently? I really do want to improve, and try to get that outside perspective. I think that would be a nice thing to do. You're saying, I'm doing all these things, it doesn't seem to be bringing me the goals or I'm not achieving the goals that I'm setting for myself. Can you help me formulate a new plan or a different plan? Okay, so the third thing I want to tell you about is something called mindfulness. Do y'all know what mindfulness is? Yeah, what is it? Being aware, yeah. Being present in the moment, right? Being open, receptive, taking it all in, not being distracted, not multitasking, right? But just being there, being aware, being in the present moment. Okay, and running is a really lovely time to practice mindfulness. If you're like me, you know, I often run with podcasts or music, and my attention is kind of all over the place. And yet, I know when I leave those things at home, I'm much more in my body. I'm better able to focus on my breathing, cadence, how things feel. Does anything feel weird? Does anything hurt? Right? And also what's around me. You're running here in some really beautiful places, right? So just kind of being able to be in your body and take all of that in is one of the things that makes running really joyful. Okay. It's also a really nice way to manage your anxiety. So when you go out for a long run and you can just turn off everything else, school, relationships, all those things, just turn it all off and be in the moment. Sounds easy, but it definitely does take some practice, and something that, you know, I would encourage you to try out every now and then. Okay, it doesn't have to be for the entirety of a run. There might be a good mile or 10 minutes or so when you're like really just taking in your surroundings, and that will hopefully feel really nice. Okay, so since you seem to know what mindfulness is, I'm going to jump right to a little scenario. All right, so let's say you're feeling overwhelmed by everything that's going on. Ever feel like that? Yeah. And so, can we use the run that you're going to be on anyway, right, to find ways to cultivate a deeper sense of calm? So you have all these things that are on your mind. How can you use your daily long run to practice mindfulness and hopefully afterwards and during feel more calm, more balanced, less anxious? Okay, so how would you do that? Maybe you've already done this. Talk about it with somebody next to you or two people next to you, and then I want to hear, because I need tips too. So you can help me out. Okay. What did you all say? What were some things you can do to practice mindfulness in your long run? Yes. Over here, what did you say? I saw hands. Okay. So listening to music and distracting yourself. I'm not sure that might be the opposite of what we're going for here. It's still pleasant. Listening to music is super pleasant, but it's also somewhere for your mind to go that isn't on the present moment. It's not necessarily on your body and how you feel internally. So maybe a little less of that. How about you? Ooh, yeah, one step at a time. So like listening to how your feet feel when they hit the gravel, if you're on one of our lovely gravel roads around here, and just kind of taking in that sensory experience. Taking in the world, the nature. Talking to your teammates. Yeah. If you notice an emotion or a thought coming up, if you have a teammate you feel comfortable with sharing these things, that could be a nice thing to kind of put out there, not in a judgmental way, just something you're noticing. Working on your what? Your breathing, yes. Breathing is something you always have with you. It's this neutral thing in your body that you can focus on. And you can even get into this mindset maybe, a minute or two before you start running, just kind of have that quiet time to focus on your breathing, focus on your body, and then continue with that as you get out there. Notice your breathing changing as you push yourself. And that's another really nice way to kind of just be in your body. Anything else? So if you know anything about meditation, this is sort of taking that meditative mindset into your run. And it's not something you might always want to do. Sometimes you're going to be more focused on your music or on, your time, checking your splits every so often. But trying to work this stuff in can actually be really nice, especially when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed with a lot of the things of life, as we often are. So that's a little tool that you can use. And mindful running is, there is some research that it's linked to better performance, better awareness of when you're starting to feel something hurting, right? If you're not paying attention to your body, you might be running through pain that you didn't really know was there. So, just kind of paying attention to all of those things. Okay, and then the last one. How many of you use social media? How many of you, it always makes you feel really good and really happy and okay, we have a couple hands. So yeah, social media is all around us, hard to avoid, and it does bring a lot of fun stuff into our lives. So we learn stuff, right? We connect with people that we might not otherwise keep in touch with. But what are some of the downsides of social media? Hey, thank you, social comparison, for real, right? So you see other people's lives, and they're perfect and carefully framed, and everybody looks so good, and you can't help but kind of look at your own self and be like, oh, it doesn't seem as good as all that. And of course, it's very carefully crafted to look a certain way, but we forget that. And we can find ourselves comparing ourselves to others quite a lot. And it doesn't always feel that good. It's not just with social media, right? On the sports field, on a run. You might be feeling really good about where you are and your performance and what you're doing, and then somebody flies by you, and you're like, oh, well, shoot. I think we've all been there, and it's human nature. How do you know if you're good at something? We all want to know how we're doing at things. So one thing that we do is we look around and we're like, well, what's everybody else doing? and sometimes that makes us feel not so great. Okay, so social comparison in sport is a really common thing. We're all high-achieving people, right? We all want to excel and do well. And I want to tell you about a little study that was done on some athletes in the Olympics. Okay, so this study was done looking at footage on NBC of Olympic athletes. This was maybe 10, 12 years ago. And they looked to see how did people react when they found out that they got either the gold, the silver, or the bronze medal. Okay, so what they found is that when people got the gold medal, they won, they were joyful, they were happy, of course. They're the best in the world at what they do. People who got the bronze medal were also pretty happy. So this is a gymnastics competition. This woman just won the bronze medal. She looks pretty happy. But what they found is that the silver medalists oftentimes looked a little disappointed, frustrated, annoyed. So this was a famous picture at the time. This is Michaela Maroney. She's a gymnast, and she got the silver medal. So it was kind of funny how upset she looked because she's the second best in the world at what she does, right? And yet she still looked disappointed. So I think this just goes to show like the power of social comparison. You can be better than how many 7 billion people on the planet, but it's that one who's better that you're going to be thinking about. And for most of us, the vast majority, there's always going to be somebody better. And it's really unfortunate that that can rob us of the joy of our own accomplishment, right? But social comparison is powerful like that. So, you know, we compare ourselves to others for lots of reasons. It's inspiring. Did anybody watch the World Track Championships last week? You see these people doing these things and you're like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. And it's inspiring, right? It makes us want to push ourselves, and that's wonderful. But we also have to watch out for when it's making us feel not so good about ourselves. And, you know, try to challenge ourselves to think about it differently. By the way, if you're interested, I love podcasts. There's a podcast called The Happiness Lab that has all kinds of like tricks for happiness, resilience, stress management, and so forth. They actually had a whole episode about social comparison in sports. So that could be a fun listen for you. Okay, so how do you put this to use? The social comparison idea. Okay, so here's a scenario. Let's say that you're having a great season. You're really meeting your goals, you're feeling great, running your best times ever, but in your upcoming meet, you know you're gonna be running against the 2-time county champion in your event. Okay, so how can you protect yourself from disappointment if this person beats you, which maybe they will? Okay, so talk about that with a friend. And here's another question. How can you be inspired by this person if there's any inspiration to take from this really stellar runner that you're up against, as opposed to feeling a sense of defeat? So talk about that for a second, and then we'll talk about them both together. All right. Okay. So you're having this great season, you're feeling good, and yet there's this person who, if you let yourself you think about them, you maybe don't feel quite as good. So how do you protect yourself from being disappointed if this person beats you in the race? Okay, yeah. So thinking about growth and progress, right? You do have the ability to close that gap. You do have the ability to beat them. If you're close, maybe you can do it, right? If you're further away, maybe you're going to have to chip away at it a little bit. You can let this be a source of motivation as well as, something that could be upsetting if you let it be, but you don't have to let it be. No, they're probably just as nervous as you are. Yeah, and that can be kind of inspiring in a way too, if you think about them as a real whole human person with challenges that they face themselves. So that can be a nice thing as well. Yeah. Ooh. Talk to them, yeah, because they are just a regular, relatable person, What are you doing? How are you, what strategies are you using? How are you training? So that can be a nice way to kind of learn from this person as well. Yes. Exactly, yeah. So think about the things that you can control and the things that you can't, right? So the thing about social comparison that's so toxic is that we cannot control what other people are doing, right? You can't control if there's somebody better that comes out to the races. I'll tell you, when I used to do like a lot of local 5Ks and things, and I live in Charlottesville, and some days I would like to try to win my age group. And there would be these two girls who were in my age group. They were twins. And every time I would see them, I'd be like, darn it, like, why are they here? Now I'm not going to do well. And I would feel badly. And I'm like, wait a minute. You can't control if they show up here today. You can't control if they get out of bed and signed up for this race. You can only control what you do, right? So I started focusing on my times instead of what other people were doing and where I placed and things like that, because you can't really control that too much. So running is wonderful because you have both things, right? You have where you place, and that's a lot of comparisons and ranking yourself relative to other people, but you also have your times. And to a certain extent, you have control over that, right? So focusing more on the times you're running, maybe trying to beat your personal best or achieve a certain time, and focusing a little bit less on what other people are doing, because that's oftentimes not going to make you feel so good, and there's nothing much you can do about it. Sometimes it can make you push, right? It can make you push to try to catch up with them or stay with them. So in that sense, it can be helpful, but you also want to have your own goals and your own benchmarks. So file that one away. Anything else? And then the second question there, people said already a few really good things. Other ways you can be inspired by these people as opposed to feeling badly. Yeah. Are they having more fun? Yeah. Oh yeah, you're having fun. Check in with, not just the performance aspect, but am I enjoying this? Do I feel strong? Do I feel fit? Am I, meeting my own goals? Do I feel proud of myself? There's so many ways to measure success, right? Mm-hmm. Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. So looking back at your trajectory of performance and seeing, perhaps you've improved and improved, and where are they? And maybe if you keep at it, you can get there too. So that sense of motivation that can come from seeing people who are really excellent. Right. So that healthy sense of competition, right? Oh, wow, they're doing this. I want to do that too. And I also like coming back around to something somebody said before, is realizing that they're also just a real person who also has bad days and setbacks and good days as well, like you. So they're not like this whole other category of person, just a regular, excellent runner like you. I had something else, but I forget what it was. Anything else about social comparison that came up that you wanted to share or ask about? Hmm? Wow. So if somebody asks you, if somebody looks up to you and they ask you, like, what's your inspiration for running? I think it's always nice to, be honest, because I'm sure that you have a really interesting story there, just like everybody has a really interesting story. So sharing that, and also, I think it's also nice to hear some of, people that we look up to, hearing the challenges they face and like the normal human moments just makes people feel more relatable. And I think it makes people like extra inspiring to hear that, oh, they have all this stuff going on too. And they face injuries and they face challenges just like I do. And I think that can help you feel like, oh, I can also still be excellent. It's not like you have to be this robotic human without a life in order to be like excellent at what you do. So I think just sharing like your humanity is a really nice thing to do. And I think that's what we don't get from social media, right? That's one reason it's so toxic, is we don't get all those like, the less perfect aspects of someone's life. We just see the perfect stuff. So kind of pulling the curtain back on that. Okay, so we talked about 4 strategies for more resilience and success in running, mental strategies. So turning that anxiety into excitement. We talked about being a friend to yourself, being compassionate toward yourself, trying to find moments of mindfulness in your running and in your life, and trying to avoid constantly comparing ourselves to other people. Okay, so we just want to open it up now for questions. We have some time. There's my email, and if you'd like to DM people on social media, there's my social media handle. But I'm going to invite Bob here to also answer some questions. Anything you want to talk about? Yeah. I'm in Miller Hall, where the planetarium is. 1179. Are you going there? Oh, cool. Yeah, Bob's also at JMU. You're in Godwin.
Yeah, Godwin Hall. It's by the football stadium.
Yeah. So did you meet Bob? Bob is a sports psychologist at JMU. Works with a lot of the JMU teams, and so we have different kinds of experiences with working with athletes.
Did you say constantly losing to who? Your brother.
His twin brother.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'm sure you don't lose at everything with him. What is he doing? I mean, what's he doing?
Yeah.
No, that's a great question.
Can I ask you a follow-up? So I know what that would be like for me if I constantly was losing to my brother. What's so bad about that for you? Like what, I know, like, why is that bad? Tell me why that's bad. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Outside of running, do you have things that you're better at? Okay. So, I mean, that's really tough, and I think you want to maybe find ways to, have that healthy competition fuel you. It sounds like it does. Yeah. So that's a good thing. Yeah, that's where social comparison is going to be really pernicious. So I think that this is a great example of using your own goals, your own standards, and really try to not do that. I know it's hard. But you also, probably want to have a lifelong relationship with your brother. So this is the stuff that can get in the way. So I think really trying to downplay that as much as you can. But I can see how it would be frustrating for sure.
Is that other than frustration, what else, what other feelings do you experience when you constantly lose to him? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No. The advice, it's interesting because obviously not everybody in the room has that same situation, right? Where maybe you're like, but you might have a situation where maybe you are constantly losing to somebody that you want to be more competitive with, right? So maybe a teammate, so maybe they're constantly running fast or whatever. So, my advice to an athlete like you would be to think about how you define success, right? So you certainly can define success in terms of how you match up against your brother in your case. And so that is one way to define success. And it sounds like that's important to you. It sounds like you want to kind of compete with him, be better than him, so on and so forth, right? And that has meaning for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if that's the only way you define success in that situation, you're kind of banking your definition of success on things that you can't control, right? So does that make sense? And so in addition to defining success that way, can you define success other ways in that area as well, right? So like if you're getting better, if you're improving or maybe closing the gap or whatever that is, then that is another way you can define success. And so you can kind of find some happiness and some joy in there as well. And then maybe eventually, someday, possibly, you have the upper hand. Yeah.
Oh, question? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you deal with the feeling of being injured, and you could be out there training with your teammates and improving, but instead you're just kind of sitting around, right? So I want to maybe challenge you to redefine that sitting around. I'm just sitting around. Mm-hmm. Your body is healing. Your body is doing what it needs to be doing. So as frustrating as it is, it is something that we all face, and it is incredibly frustrating. But how do you deal with it in a positive way? Are there things that you can do to have that long view? Like when I come back, I'm going to do this PT, so I'm going to be even stronger. Are there things you can read, things you can learn to kind of, as a holistic, an athlete from a holistic perspective about nutrition or about mental training, doing things like yoga, flexibility, core work, working within the limitations that that you're dealing with at the moment. So then you can come back and you are stronger. I often also really benefit from reading stories of athletes, like books by runners where they talk about their periods of injury, because everybody has them, and how they felt frustrated, and it just kind of makes me feel like I'm not alone. That's another thing. I don't know if is anybody on Strava. I love Strava, but like when I'm injured, I can't look at Strava. It's like I don't want to see what people are doing. And social media with runners and stuff, because it just doesn't make me feel good. So really kind of checking in with yourself, like what are the things that are bringing you down? And are there ways to kind of step back from those and prepare to come back stronger? Your body is doing important work when you're healing. So just trying to remind yourself of that.
Rob and Jamie, can you talk a little bit about how the athletes bounces back from a disappointing race? They have to come back in, let's say, an hour or two during meet. What can they do mentally to be ready for that next race?
That's a great question. The advice that I typically give an athlete in that situation is to, if you've had a bad race and if you've underperformed, it's okay. I mean, it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to feel that, and that's part of the process. Every emotion that we feel serves a purpose, and sometimes when we feel disappointed, it allows us to kind of slow down, take a step back, think about what happened, and then maybe understand it differently, and then come back with maybe a greater sense of motivation or desire or drive, right? And so the fact that you're disappointed, that's not really the issue to me. It's okay to feel disappointed. It's just at some point you don't want to kind of continue to feel that way, because it's not going to help you maybe get ready for that next race. And so the first thing I say is just acknowledge it's okay to have a bad race. It's okay to fall short of your expectations. It just means that you weren't good enough in that particular race. That's all that means. It just means that you fell short. We all fall short. That's all that it is. And so then, and then once that happens, you can't control it. So at some point, you can't go back and change it. And so it doesn't do you any good to think about it and worry about it. And it's just a race. And so as you move forward to the next one is, can you kind of shift your focus into what you can control, and that is getting yourself ready for that next race and whatever goals you have set for that race, and then going out there and just trying to do your best in that race. And so it's really in many ways just kind of staying focused on what you can control. And maybe even related to the question about the injury, the thing I would add to that is, injuries suck, they stink, they're not fun, right? Nobody wants to have those. And so they're kind of a threat, just like losing the race can be a threat. And so you can choose to think about it that way. You can choose to think about, okay, what's the challenge in front of me? What's the opportunity that's in front of me here? So I didn't have a great race, or I'm injured. So then what is the opportunity for me? What can I achieve? What can I get better at? What is in front of me here? And then shifting your focus there. That'd be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you have a race, like you're in a meet and you have a race coming up in another hour or two, you are thinking about the disappointment, but I'd be really mindful of how you're talking to yourself. Because if you're like, God, I suck, that probably doesn't bode well for your next race, right? So you might want to put a pin in it, pause in those moments, and be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to step back from this. I'm going to think about it later, but I have to focus on what's in front of me right now, and come back to it later on, because that negative mindset probably won't help you do better in the next event.
Well, actually, that reminds me of something I do with athletes at JMU, where if that situation happens, and so they're disappointed, or they're feeling maybe a way they don't want to feel, I will actually have them write it down on a piece of paper or put it on their phone or something, and literally like put it in a little bag of some kind, tie that bag, and then drop it somewhere, right? So that feeling of disappointment, whatever they're feeling about that previous race. And then knowing that at any point in time, I can go back and feel that way when I want to. But right now, I have to get ready on this next race. And so I'm going to put this feeling, I'm going to set it to the side. I'm literally going to set it to the side, knowing that I can go back to it whenever I want. And then after that last second race or whatever, then, okay, now I want to feel disappointed, because I am disappointed. I didn't run very well. I didn't execute my strategy. Maybe I didn't push myself through that difficult part of the race like I wanted to. And so let me feel that afterwards, and I can think about that and strategize how I can do better. But I can put a pin in it or literally put it to the side, and I can go back and feel that when I want to feel that way.
Yeah, I love that, because there's actually a lot of research on writing and why it's important to write things down. Especially if you're going over again and again in your head, ruminating on them, kind of that negative spiral of thinking. If you write it down, you know it's out there. You can kind of close the book on it for a little while, or forever maybe even, and it's down. You did it. You did the work. Just letting it fester in your brain, not so good. Oh yeah, so the experiment we did with the marathon team at JMU. So I was curious to see, like, what are the psychological outcomes of training for a marathon? Because it's a big growth experience, right? And ups and downs and pushing yourself. And so we got a sample. This was several years ago, so dusting out the cobwebs, but we got some students who were in this marathon class, and they trained the whole semester to run a marathon in December at the end, and a sample of people from another, it was a kinesiology, Kin 100, it's like a gen ed health class, and we compared them from beginning to end, and we didn't have quite enough people to really make like a strong conclusion. But if I remember, a lot of the most interesting results were in the stories people told about growth and pushing themselves, and how they were so glad they did this marathon. And people had really cool stories to tell, and it seems like they also often remember it as really powerful and meaningful. They often want to do marathons again in the future. So yeah, this idea of growth through pushing yourself to do something hard, and how it's that type 2 fun, right? It's hard, but you get a lot out of it, and you look back on it really, really positively. Sorry, can you say again? How do you encourage your friends? Oh, with running or with all things? Oh, yeah. So how do you encourage your friends who the littlest things get them down? Great question. Great question. Those little annoyances do take up a lot of our headspace, and they can really bring us down if we let them. So I think there's a lot of really interesting work in psychology about how we can change our mindset, and it's a practice. But let's say that your friend, I don't know, texted somebody they're interested in, and that person didn't write them back. Okay, just as an example. Like, what do you tell yourself in your head? You could say, this person doesn't like me, this person thinks I'm not attractive or not fun, or nobody likes me, which is a really dark place to go. But you can practice challenging those assumptions, like, well, why might it be different? Well, maybe they lost their phone. Maybe the message didn't go through. Maybe they forgot who I was. Maybe they are intimidated by my beauty and amazingness. So maybe encouraging your friends to, like, how could it be different? You know, why are you wrong, basically? Try to give them a more healthy perspective. And then hopefully they can start practicing that for themselves. That would be a really nice thing to do. What else? Challenges you're facing, maybe mental blocks that keep you from performing as well as you'd like to. Not with running, but with, oh. Okay, so they're competitive with sports, but they don't like running that much. But they're good. They have talent. Huh. Okay. Do you have a question? Any ideas on that one?
So what you're wanting to like get them to run? So, yeah, but that's a great one.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's tough because like it's probably more frustrating for you, right? Because you maybe see how talented they are, yet maybe they don't, for whatever reason, want it or like it as much or whatever. And I mean, my first response is like you can't make somebody do something they don't want to do, right? I mean, you guys know that, right? Can I make you do what you don't want to do? No. But it's I mean, being encouraging, but also just, to some extent, allowing them to do what it is that they want to do and being okay with that. And, but it can be frustrating, just acknowledging that, and maybe finding ways to communicate that to them. Like, man, you would be so good at this. I understand if you don't want, but man, if you want to talk about it a little bit or whatever, but yeah, you'd be really. I mean, and it's funny because I'm just going through the list of the people in my life that I've had that same feeling about, and like, man, for me, it's almost like, boy, I wish I was that good at, but that's where sometimes it comes from for me as well.
Yeah, I would ask them like, why? Why
Yeah.
don't you want to run? Right? So I mentioned at the beginning, when I was in high school, running was punishment. Right? You didn't just go run. Like you ran if you underperformed, take a lap, or you ran as a warm up, but it was never something you would just do. And so I didn't realize that running could be a really joyful, wonderful thing. And I eventually found it out for myself. So I might ask them like, why don't you like running? And then what are the things that make you love it the most? Can you share that with them? Because I think, long term, it's really wonderful when your closest friends, your family, your partner also share your joy in something that you love. So is there a way to make it contagious? I have a friend who always hated running, thought it was kind of a punishment, and I talked her into doing a 5K, a New Year's 5K, and just the energy of the race, the beauty of the mountains where we were, she was like, oh wow, now I get it. Now I get why you love this. So just kind of bringing to life what you love about it, not in a way like you need to like this, but maybe your enthusiasm would be contagious. Yeah. Ooh, okay. So you're huddled up in for the cross country meet, an important one. What would you say to your team right before the gun goes off? This might be more in Bob's camp.
I have lots of questions for you that I want to ask, but the first thing I would say is, like, if I'm in that situation, is just don't put like a tremendous amount of pressure on yourself to say the right thing. I think in that moment, like if you're that team leader, you just got to be who you are, especially for like those big meets, because I mean, in the end, like a big meet is just a meet. It's just a meet that's big. It's no different than, I mean, to be successful in that sort of meet, it's no different than a lot of other, it's the task is still the same. Now maybe the consequences and the meaning of it all is different, but so you don't want to be anybody other than yourself in that moment. So I would encourage you, like the way you've been leading your team throughout the whole entire season, is just be that same person, right? Because I think what that communicates to your teammates that, hey, this moment isn't bigger than me. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to lead us in the way that I normally lead us, and maybe find words of inspiration that are meaningful to you, and that maybe that you think would be helpful. I think in those moments we can almost put too much pressure on ourselves to say the right thing, and that's going to make everybody run great, because we know it's not that simple, right? And so my main advice is just be yourself. Just lead the way you normally would lead.
Yeah, I agree. There's probably a lot of wrong things you could say,
Yeah.
but There's
Yeah.
probably no one magical right thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not the first person to ask that
Is
question.
that fear of re-injury, is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah. The fear of being re-injured. I mean, yeah, that does, it makes a lot of sense. It happened once, right? You don't want it to happen again. So with anything that's scary, what we often do is avoid it, and then we don't have to deal with it, right? And often the bravest thing to do is to face it. So, sometimes we just have to push ourselves with the help and the advice of our coaches, our doctors, our physical therapists, not going beyond what they're advising. And sometimes, when you're coming back and you feel so good and you're so motivated, it's very easy to push yourself too much. So I would definitely caution against that and really sticking to the plan, even if it's not exactly what you want to do, and trust those experts.
Yeah, and what I would add is, like, if you've never been injured before, you're naive, right? You don't know any better. And then if you've ever have suffered a major injury, then now you know it can happen, right? So to actually have a fear of experiencing an injury again is absolutely normal. I mean, it's perfectly normal. And so some of us will be able to respond right away and like whatever, and they'll go right back into it. Others of us will be a little bit more cautious, maybe a little bit more tentative. What it ultimately, for me, what it comes down to is that feeling of, like, if you feel like you're in control of what's going to happen, then the fear of injury doesn't exist, right? And so one of the best things that you can, when you are injured, is to really understand what the injury is and get information and knowledge, and where you're getting information from doctors and trainers if you have access to that sort of thing. So the more knowledge you have, the more you can understand, the more like you feel like you're in control, right? And if we're in control, then it's really hard to be anxious if we feel like we're in control. And so a lot of times the fear of injury is like, well, what happens if this happens again? And so whether it's maybe you're injuring yourself the same again, or maybe you're wanting to avoid, like, well, if I get injured again, then I'm going to be out and all that miserable stuff's going to happen again. In the end, you really can't control that, right? Because that's all in the future. So what it ultimately comes down to, for me, is just can you stay kind of focused on the things that you can control? There's always going to be a risk. You have to kind of understand that there's a risk. But if you get information and listen to your body, listen to your coaches, just listen to your doctors, then you can kind of build that confidence back to the point of, like, at some point, you're like, I don't even think about that anymore, right? If that makes sense. But it's normal. I mean, that fear is pretty normal, and because you're not naive anymore, and so to not overly worry about the fact that you're fearful, that's going to be part of that healing process. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you break through a mental block that slows you down? That's so you need a little more information, I think. What kind of mental block? Yeah. Yeah, the mental block of I'm going to be too tired, I'm going to push too hard too soon, and it'll all fall apart. I think this is where practice comes in. Practice, do it in practice, and you'll learn. Okay, that pace was too quick, too soon, and I need to scale it back. And the more you practice it and fine tune it, the better able you will be to find that sweet spot. So I wouldn't wait until race day to test these things out. Go into the race knowing you've experimented, you've done those things, and here's where you can push. And then once you get close to the end, hopefully you have something in the tank to really let it go. But I think it just takes time and experimentation and practice.
Yeah, I think if there's an easy answer to that question, neither one of us would be standing on the stage because we'd have a lot of money and be somewhere else if we had an easy answer to that question. I think mental blocks are I think they're hard for, when I work with an athlete, a mental block is like, it can mean so many different things, right? And And so, and oftentimes we say like, well, I can't do this, therefore I must have a mental block about it. And so a mental block could be because you're feeling anxious, or maybe you're lacking confidence in that, or maybe you're focused on things that you can't control. So part of like understanding how do you get through a mental block is understanding, well, what exactly is happening. So when I get to that part of the race, whatever, and I'm struggling, well, what am I thinking about? Am I focusing on things that I can control? Am I doubting myself? Am I getting over anxious, and that's fatiguing me? So part of, for me, is like, well, what's actually happening in that moment? And it could be, usually, my experience, usually a mental block usually comes down to confidence. And I think Jamie kind of talked a little bit about how you can develop confidence in that moment. But for me, like what I'm helping out through a mental block is we oftentimes think about confidence as this feeling that you have to have. If you're chasing a feeling of confidence, you're going to be running after it for a long time. It's really hard to catch a feeling of confidence, because confidence is more kind of how you choose to believe and think in that moment, right? So whatever you're having a mental block about, if you can convince yourself that I can get through this, I can be better, you can convince yourself of that, practice, experience, but also just see it in your mind, believe that you can do it, then that's where that feeling of confidence will come from, by making a choice about what you believe to be true about yourself.
There's a great book called Endure, came out in the last 5 years, and I can't remember the author's name, but I would highly encourage this book. It's a lot about mental training, mental toughness, and one of the ideas of the book is like, a lot of our performance is so mentally based, and often when it comes to like long distance running, our brains get tired before our bodies do, and we tell ourselves certain kinds of things when we feel sensations in our body, and learning to change your narrative can really help you push through those things. I don't know if this is true or if this is just a sort of urban legend, but the 4-minute mile, right? For years and years, it's like nobody can physically run under 4-minute mile. And now it's done fairly regularly. And some people have talked about that for many people, it was a mental block. There was just this idea that cannot be done. And once it started being done, then it became, that mental block went away for a lot of people, and it became something that was actually feasible with tons of hard work. Technology, training, shoes have all improved too, but part of it was mental. So our brains are powerful, powerful tools. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. So after bad races, what do you do if you catch yourself making excuses? So I would say I would applaud you for noticing that and calling it that, because that's, I think, really an important first step, is just that awareness. Sometimes the things are true. Sometimes the weather sucked, or something hurt you, or there's some legitimacy to some of it. So I would also want to give a nod to that. But I would also just, question it. Like, is this an excuse, or could it be something else? And try to ask yourself those questions. Am I just trying to make myself feel better right now? Or is there really an element of truth to this? And maybe talking it out with someone could also help.
Can you give me an example of an excuse that you might make? Say it loud so I can hear you. Yeah. So when you succeed or fail, right, there's always going to be reasons why that happens. And there's ways that you can explain your performance, and you can do that in ways that will, help you stay confident and optimistic, or not. And so I'd like to think about like excuses and think about them more as reasons, right? And there's legitimate ones that will help you, and then there's other ones that maybe you're just making them up to feel better. But you know, in general, so like if you have a bad race, what I would encourage you to be thinking about is that you think about like, well, why did that happen, right? Can you like explain it by things that that are within your control that can change, right? So maybe your race strategy wasn't the best, right? Or maybe the time of when you ate whatever you ate, maybe that wasn't the best strategy, right? But can that change for next time? Yeah, right? If it's the weather, so maybe you have a bad race, but maybe the weather, maybe it was a really hot day, right? And that's not an excuse, but that is a factor that you can say, well, I had a poor race today because the weather wasn't great. Now maybe I need to find a way to deal with that because the weather wasn't great for everybody, right? So maybe I can hydrate more or whatever, and I can figure out a better strategy for those hotter days. But that's not an excuse. That's a reason. And so if you can kind of think about things that you can control and that you can change when you think about your race, especially if it's a bad race, and that's going to be the best excuse to make. And so I would encourage you to look for those sorts of reasons as opposed to my stomach, these maybe random things that you're trying to do that make you feel better about yourself. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, there's always something to be learned.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we have time for
Good
one
question.
more question.
All right, in the back.
Oh. Oh, the guilt of doing badly in a relay. Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we think of running as such an individual sport, but when it comes to relays, So do any of you play sports besides running? More team-based sports? So you might have to deal with this kind of thing a lot in those venues. And even your track meets and cross-country meets, it's still a team sport because you're accumulating points and things like that. So I think you can take lessons from those areas as well. Hopefully you would get support from your relay teammates. They wouldn't be too hard on you. I think this is where the self-compassion stuff comes in. Being kind to yourself, being a friend to yourself, maybe reminding yourself of the times that your teammates also had those slip-ups and those very human moments as well.
And I would add, if you're feeling guilty, maybe because you performed poorly on the relay, I think that's a normal thing to feel, and it kind of shows that you wanted to do better, but you didn't, and maybe you felt like you let your teammates down, which you did not want to happen, right? So the fact that you're feeling guilty is maybe okay. Now, if it continues over a longer period of time, then that's not going to be healthy for you, right? And so kind of what Jamie was suggesting is usually we're going to be harsher on ourselves than anybody else, right? Yeah. And that's been my experience in working with athletes in general, and certainly with runners, is you're your harshest critic. Nobody's harder on you than yourself. And so whatever you're feeling about yourself, put yourself in your teammates' shoes, looking at maybe you, and I doubt they're thinking the same thing, she let us down, she was terrible, right? Yeah. It's probably not the way they're thinking and feeling, right? They're not. You're not, right? And so, but it feels differently when it's you, and I get it and I understand that. And but just again, try to put yourself in your teammate's shoes and whatever. So what would you say to that teammate? You wouldn't say to that teammate, "You're terrible. You let us down." You would probably be supportive, encouraging. "Hey, it's okay. You'll get him next time." That sort of thing. And so, oftentimes we have to give ourselves that pep talk that we would give to our teammate, recognizing it's way harder to give to ourselves because you are disappointed, right? You wanted to do better. So feeling guilty, I think, is just a reflection of this was important to me. I didn't perform the way I wanted to. I feel like I let my teammates down. I know they're supporting me. I would support them. And then maybe having some conversation with them for them to reassure you. And then okay, well, what am I going to do different next time? How can I do better next time? I think that's how you deal with it. Yeah, good question. Great question.
Great question.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you all. All right. So have fun with the rest of camp and good luck in your season. And thanks.
All right, thank you. Hold on just 1 second. Let's give our speakers one more round of applause. Thank you very much. So what was the one thing that Jamie said you should do? Write stuff down. So you learned a lot of stuff today. If you go back to your room, have some time, jot something in your journal, on your phone. You're getting a lot of useful information this week. Try not to have it go one ear and out the other and you forget everything you learned over the 5 days you're here. So, all right, lunch is next.